published the Lagos News. He served as the first president of the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria, NPAN. Jakande ran for election as executive governor of Lagos State in 1979 on the Unity Party of Nigeria platform. His administration was effective and open and implemented the cardinal policies of his party. He introduced housing and educational programs targeting the poor, building new neighborhood primary and secondary schools, and providing.
The challenge of governance is to see how we can leverage what is on the ground and convert this to wealth for the people.
Russia, China are gaining entry into Africa, and it would appear that some Western countries are losing out.
You're working as an expatriate worker, then you're paid in your currency. But then if you must spend those money, you need to convert those money to the local currency to spend.
For Social Security to work, we need to know exactly how many we are. We don't have a precise number. We need to know exact location of people.
When we address this exchange rate volatility, we will see definitely cost of goods and services will come down.
From a security point of view, we should employ the technology to ensure that we can track individuals and goods within the continent.
This is Early Exchange with Femi Ayodele.
You know, the Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development. With our conversation today, we're set to give you the best of programming.
And Blessing Aiche.
We do hope that you enjoy every time you spend with us here today. The world needs peace. The world needs to come to a round table and find solutions to the pockets of troubles.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Hello and welcome to Early Exchange. I am Blessing Aiche. It's a day after Easter. How was your holiday? I do hope that you enjoyed every bit of it and had enough rest to carry you through till there is another holiday like this. Femi Ayodele is here with me, and today we'll be taking a close look at global economic trends. Hello, Femi. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. The holiday is over. We never had one.
We never had, but for those who had.
All right, good morning. Glad you have been joining us on Early Exchange this morning, where we talk about issues related to business, finance, and the economy. Always our pleasure to be your host and to kickstart your day. Today we'll be looking at the U.S. economy. Today is meant for global update, and we're going to start our conversation looking at the U.S. economy, the latest development as regards the inflation rate, and how it's going to affect an average American. And by extension, we're going to look at how Nigeria can learn some lessons from that. Don't forget, we can be part of our conversation. The platform for you to do that is our social media platforms and our YouTube page. And now let's start with news update. We switch over to the newsroom now for the news update.
Hello and welcome to News Update. I am Grace Komalafe. The Nigerian government has announced an 11% increase in the wholesale price of gas supplied to power plants, rising from $2.18 per million British thermal units to $2.42 per million British thermal units. This decision follows a period of reduced supply by gas companies to power plants since January, stemming from outstanding invoices totaling over $1.2 billion. To address the situation, the government intervened by disbursing $120 million to the companies last month amidst a challenging power supply nationwide. In a notice issued by the Chief Executive of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, Engineer Farouk Ahmed, the commercial wholesale gas price was also raised to $2.92 per million British thermal units. The authority invoked powers granted by the Petroleum Industry Act 2021 to establish domestic base prices and applicable wholesale prices for natural gas in strategic sectors, ensuring a balance between domestic market demand and international benchmarks. The National Bureau of Statistics says despite ongoing challenges in the power sector, the Nigerian electricity distribution companies has experienced a significant revenue surge, reaching 1.1 trillion naira in 2023, a 28.2% increase from the previous year. This growth occurred despite frequent grid collapses, totaling 46 incidents from 2017 to 2023. Notably, companies like Ikeja, Eko, and Abuja electricity distribution companies led the revenue case increase. The boost in revenue collection efficiency was partly due to increased billing, especially through estimated billing systems, which also attracted more customers. However, there was a slight decrease in customers under estimated billing, coinciding with a 9.38% rise in metered connections. And Malian political parties are demanding a clear timeline for presidential elections after the ruling junta failed to meet its promised 24 months transition to democracy. Since August 2020, Mali has been under military rule, part of a wave of coup across West and Central Africa. Despite regional mediation efforts, interim governments have been slow to act. The current junta seized power in a second 2021 coup, initially aimed for civilian rule within 24 months from March 2022, with elections planned for February. However, after passing a new electoral law in June 2022, the postponed elections, citing technical issues sparking outrage. Major parties and civil society groups issued a joint statement urging prompt action to establish an electoral framework. However, Mali's military rules are yet to respond. And in another development, a Singapore court has convicted the first defendant in its largest ever money laundering case, with over $2.2 billion in assets seized by or frozen. Defendant Zhu Wengeng, a Cambodian national, confessed to 11 counts of money laundering and profiting from illegal remote gambling activities. According to the report, he was sentenced to 13 months in prison. The case is part of a high-profile investigation involving 10 foreigners with multiple citizenships arrested in Singapore last August. The raids gained widespread attention locally, with authorities seizing $739.37 million worth of luxury assets, including properties, cars, gold bars, and jewelry, as police suspected the suspect of laundering proceeds from overseas organized crime, including scams and online gaming. And Japan's Industry Ministry has announced its approval of subsidies totaling up to $3.9 billion for chip foundry venture Rapidos as part of Tokyo's effort to revitalize the country's chip manufacturing sector. This approval supplements the previous agreement of subsidies amounting to approximately $2.2 billion for Rapidos. Notably, the newly approved aid includes $353 million designated for advanced packaging, crucial for enhancing chip performance. Rapidos, led by industry veterans, aims to commence mass production of state-of-the-art chips in Hokkaido by 2027, in collaboration with IBM and Belgium-based research organization IMEC. However, skepticism persists within the industry regarding Rapidos' potentials for success, especially when compared to established gains like Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Co. And that's all for news update. I am Grace Komalafe. Kindly sit back for early exchange as it continues.
All right, thank you, Grace, for the news update. You know, taking us around the world, that's what you do best. And what a way to start the program. Before we get to talking about the U.S. economy, let's start from China, where the first quarter of the year is looking good for the Chinese economy. According to statistics released, the first quarter of the year as projected has performed optimally as projected by the authority in China. Let's see how this will play out as the National Bureau of Statistics is set to release the related figure by April 16. But our conversation here is to look at what China has been doing in the last 3 months, which is the first quarter of the year. We'll bring in our own in-house analyst, Dr. Idauza Samanzi. Glad to have you join us this morning.
Femi, very good morning to you.
Yes, glad to have you back.
Blessing, good morning.
Welcome
Pleasure
back.
to be here again.
Yes, physically this time, not joining by Zoom.
It's nice to be home.
Great, great. No place like home.
There is none at all.
Yeah,
The best country on the planet is actually Nigeria.
Oh, you can say that again.
Oh, yeah.
We're proud of what we have.
Oh, yeah. God bless us with so much. And we need to be really very grateful to what nature has given to us. There's no country like Nigeria on the planet Earth. And that's not any flattery.
Great, that's the universal truth. All right, let's get to China. We'll talk about Nigeria later, but let's start with what's going on in China. Looking at the performance of the Chinese economy in the last 3 months, the report for the first quarter shows that it has experienced some kind of improvement and growth. How will you assess this kind of performance in the last 3 months, and what do you think is largely responsible for this?
Well, I think when we look at economies around the globe today, we cannot treat any particular economy in isolation of what is happening because of the effect of globalization on the world. And you see Chinese companies are producing more for exports than for local consumption. Now you see that almost all the economy globally are having signs of pickup. If you go to Paris, you go to Germany, you go to the US, even the Latin America countries, even back home in Africa. So projections are changing. And that also showing that countries are beginning to adjust to the shock based on the economic policies that all the central banks globally are implementing to see how to stimulate growth because of the projection that it was going to be very slow. Now, there's no way this will not impact what the companies in China are doing. And also, thanks to the even domestic policy, which of course the Bank of China also had implemented to put more money in the hands of the Chinese people. While Nigeria was complaining about inflation, and most countries in the world were talking about inflation, in China it was actually deflation, that people were not having so much money to buy. And government needed to see how to put money in the hands of people that they have that disposable income to actually afford. And I think this is actually paying off for China in the figures that we are seeing for the month of March.
All right, so the first quarter ended very strong for China. There was improvement in hiring, the type never seen from late 2020. That was when the epidemic broke out. But one sector did not actually grow so much in terms of hiring. That was services. What do you think could be the reason for that?
Well, I think it's also fundamental to know. You look at it between 2020 and 2023. The Chinese economy was the longest shut. They closed it for longer than any country in the world. It was not until late 2023 that China opened their gates for people to come into China. That, of course, would have affected the rate of growth. But now we're also seeing that the doors are open and people are doing business more with China. Now, what are they really known for? They are known for hardware manufacturing. So that's where actually their competitive advantage lies as a country. So producing for export. So it's expected that that is the area where, of course, people are going to hire more or need more services than in the service region. So Chinese will do more in terms of producing manufacturing than services because their core competence is in manufacturing.
let me point your attention to what actually led to this performance. According to the statement released in this regard, the economy clearly improved in March thanks to better industrial activity and stronger retail spending. Now, what do you make of the industrial activity in China? Because when it comes to China, that's the hub of industrial activity. And this has significantly contributed to the growth of the economy in the last 3 months, especially in the month of March. What does that suggest to you about?
Yeah, but it's just the same point that we have made, that because it's a production economy, manufacturing is the real driver for growth for China. Almost all countries in the world are relying upon China to produce whatever equipment you want, whether it is even the most developed economies in the world. China is producing for everybody because of cost of labor, which had been effectively managed in China with the deployment of robotics and humanoids to help in industrial sector. So these have helped greatly. Now, the other arm is the fact that the Bank of China also implemented some measure to put money in the hands of people. And that's the point I was making. So if you have more money in your hand, you can buy. So you are producing, those who are at home are getting more money and support in terms of reduction of rate and interest. And it was almost getting to the minus like just Japan was doing. So what this means is that if you're borrowing, you can actually access credit at a very ridiculous rate. And this empower you to be able to buy. So as these activities are happening, see the ripple effect on the whole economy. So what this means is that there is so much money in the household, and therefore they can go to the market and purchase. So this is why you're seeing this kind of growth in the retail side, and of course in the monetary side you're also seeing a positive growth because there is a lot of people also placing order for manufactured goods from China. So I think these are what are largely responsible for that trajectory in growth.
Now, apart from retail, people are also moving into investment. Fixed asset investment also grew in this first quarter in China.
Yeah, you see, you can see that in the stock market. So what it means really is that if your companies are doing well and people are getting more money, now chances are that, of course, you see people are going to invest in wealth generation and creation. So this is what we're saying. So the stock is also doing well because the companies are doing well. So all the listed companies in China are experiencing growth. Because once you have a boom, potential for people to want to invest is also high. So if you have more money in your hand, you save some, you invest some, and that shows up in the performance of the corporations.
Now, the growth target for this year, as far as China is concerned, is 5%. Do you think with the level that China is engaged in production, because what drives the economy, it's all about production, and then now you promote small businesses. Now, with this target growth of 5%, and looking at the performance in the last 3 months, which is the first quarter of the year, do you think this is achievable?
Well, like they say, in economy, ceteris paribus, everything being equal. But we know that nothing is equal, really. So I think if the situation globally as it is today maintain this form of relative stability and we're getting more peace, then of course the possibility of this happening is also very high. But we cannot say for certainty what's going to happen tomorrow. And that's why in many circles today, people talk about the concept of VUCA. You talk about the volatility, about the uncertainty, you talk about the complexity and the ambiguity that you find in global management system. Now, in a VUCA management environment, where everything is in a state of flux, you don't really know what's going to happen tomorrow. So you cannot be, with exactitude, predict or determine how growth will do. But we say all things being equal. So if this kind of situation that is responsible for this growth remain, then of course they can actually reach 5% or so past 5%. More activities that is happening globally, the more of course pressure would be on the factories that are shut down. A lot of production activities happening, and you're seeing this growth continue. So it's just a measure of the wealth that is coming upon the nations. And we do hope that the crisis in places like the Ukraine does not escalate. We hope that Middle East remains settled. And once these channels of trade are in order and there are no disruptions on the logistics system globally, the supply chain is moving, then of course we can expect this to continue through the end of the year.
Well, let's look at some internal factors. Or you talked about some of the external issues that could hamper growth. So when this announcement was made, the projection for 5% growth for China, some analysts see it as ambitious given the announced current government stimulus. Do you think that some of the internal policies of China could also hamper its growth?
Well, I think that there's no more strategic nation globally as we speak right now like China. And as a matter of fact, we always say China is second after America. China is actually the biggest economy globally, bigger than America by every indices. And this is because the Chinese government is deliberate about its domestic policies on how to drive growth. And this is done at two levels. What they're doing internally to ensure that money is in the hands of the average Chinese to be able to do business and that there is eternal prosperity. They are also investing so much on the outside to stimulate growth at home. So if Chinese are doing business in almost all countries in the world, all that they're doing, they're putting money in all economies. They're putting money in America, they're putting money in Europe, they're putting money in Africa, they're putting money in the Middle East. Now all this come back to drive demand for the product at home. So this is what is actually pushing the Chinese economy, which is quite different from what America is doing. So China is business driven. America is ego driven as of today. So more money that Americans spend is in crisis region than they do for economic prosperity of nations. But China is deliberate and they know what they want. So they want more contracts in Africa, more contracts in Europe, and as they are doing this contract, most of the accessories you import from China as part of the agreement, and this is adding value to their economy. So they are really not meddling into economy, into the politics of nation. China is only interested in meddling into the economy of nation. And that's why the economy is growing quite very fast, or faster than what America is doing. So the biggest threat to America right now is actually China in terms of economic power.
Now, China remains one of the largest business partners for Africa as a continent. And if you look at the level of economic relation over the years, it's been huge and it's strategic. But what do you make of what is going on in China and how Africa can learn some lessons from it? Looking at the performance in the last 3 months and the statistics recorded in the first quarter of the year, what are some of the lessons for African nations who are also strategic partners to China?
I think the biggest lesson that Africa can learn from China is a lesson about patriotism and nationalism. The Chinese are quite patriotic and they are very, very nationalistic. China is deliberate in putting its footprint in the sound of time globally. And this is driven by the Chinese culture. And that's why if you go to the University of Lagos here, you see a center where the Chinese culture, Mao Zedong, is studied. Because there's a correlation between ethical practice and economic growth. So you're seeing people who are dedicated to ethical practices in their country. And so they put their country first than personal interest. And the real problem in Africa is that we put our personal interest over and above the national interest. Now, once you see people who become patriotic, people who deliberately sell their culture in Africa, what you're going to see is a trajectory of growth. But as long as we are much more interested in retaining power, and without also looking at the other side of the economy to see how economy function well, we'll have problem. So most of the time, we sacrifice the economy on the altar of politics in Africa. But for China, it is not. Yes, of course, they've had a stable form of democracy because the current president of China is actually be given the opportunity to govern China because he's seen as the architect of the modern China, and then of course that can happen until his death. So that trust that has been committed to him is also helping for stability. Now, what do you see in Africa? The horse trading, which happened while people are trying to grab power or to take power in Africa, is what is actually the antithesis to economic growth in Africa. If you want to take power, you're trying to settle everybody so that they can give you the opportunity to get into power. Then, of course, you compromise economic policies and theories and principles. Then, of course, you can experience growth. So now Africa really, basically, must learn this particular ethical practice from China. And you know in China, if you steal, debt are with you. And when they say head rules, it does not mean people are sacked. It means people die. And therefore, you see a very high ethical standard, and the rate of corruption is quite reduced. And this is really happening right now in all the Asian countries. So recently, I think it was last week, the former Minister of Trade in Singapore was in court for a 35-count charge. And it was leveled up because they said it was discovered that a company he dealt with gave him a bottle of whiskey.
Well, that is really, really surprising because it seemed like, well, it's just a gift.
Yes, it's just a gift of whiskey. But that's landing him in jail right now as we speak.
All right, so let's not talk about China's sectors. So the real estate sector is experiencing growth, but that's for commercial sales. For residential apartments and all, there's also been a decline in that area. Is it that people there are just comfortable where they are and not doing much of? But it seems like everything about China right now is commercial.
You know, apart from Japan that was having a reverse growth in population, China too also has had this challenge in terms of population growth because it's stunting, it's not actually increasing. And that's why India has overtaken China in terms of the largest population in the world, because of the single birth policy that was initiated some years ago in China. Even when right now government is actually putting incentive on people having up to 2 or 3 children, but the Chinese young people are already used to having no child at all, and so that they are comfortable with it. Yeah, what is going to happen when children are not there? In the last 20 years, you're having young people who already have the house, and they are not having people who are moving into those shoes. It will be very difficult for you to see that kind of growth in the residential area. You get it. So China policy of one child per family had actually affected, and that is why you talk about China today. We're talking about an aging population, a population that had got into its plateau and is not moving beyond, and is actually trying to decline because they're not having so much beds. And until people embrace having more children, you can't get that growth in the commercial or residential property sector. But the commercial business is going on. Of course, people will continue to rent property for business. And I think that may be what's accounting for that.
All right, we're not done looking at the Chinese economy, but we need to go on this break. When we return, we'll continue our conversation. Stay with us.
Lateef Jakande. Born Lateef Kayode Jakande in the Ekbetedo area of Lagos Island, Lagos State on July 1929. He studied at the Lagos Public School at Enowa, Lagos Island, then at Bonham Memorial Methodist School, Port Harcourt, King's College, enrolled at Ilesha Grammar School, where he edited a literary paper called The Quarterly Mirror. Jakonde began a career in journalism in 1949 with a daily service and joined the Nigerian Tribune in 1953. The owner, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, appointed Jakonde editor-in-chief of the Tribune in 1956. Jakonde established John West Publications in 1975 after leaving Tribune and began to publish the Lagos News. He served as the first president of the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria, NPAN. Jakonde ran for election as executive governor of Lagos State in 1979 on the Unity Party of Nigeria platform. His administration was effective and open and implemented the cardinal policies of his party. He introduced housing and educational programs targeting the poor, building new neighborhood primary and secondary schools, and providing free primary and secondary education. He gave poor people's children education, and many of them are now very prominent in the society today. Jakonde established the Lagos State University and constructed over 30,000 housing units. After the military takeover in 1983, Jakonde was charged, prosecuted, and convicted of treason and later pardoned. He served as Minister of Works under the Sani Abacha military regime. He died in Lagos on February 11, 2021. Lateef Jakonde was the first civilian governor of Lagos State. Lateef Kayode Jakonde, SOUQ Enlightenment.
The challenge of governance is to see how we can leverage what is on the ground and convert this to wealth for the people.
Russia, China are gaining entry into Africa, and it would appear that some Western countries are losing out.
You're working as an expatriate worker, then you're paid in your currency. But then if you must spend those money, you need to convert those money to the local currency to spend.
For Social Security to work, we need to know exactly how many we are. We don't have a precise number. We need to know exact location of people.
When we address this exchange rate volatility, we will see definitely cost of goods and services will come down.
From a security point of view, we should employ the technology to ensure that we can track individuals and goods within the continent.
This early exchange with Femi Ayodele.
You know, the early exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development. With our conversation today, we're set to give you the best of programming.
And Blessing Aiche.
We do hope that you enjoy every time you spend with us here today. The world needs peace. The world needs to come to a round table and find solutions to the pockets of troubles.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
All right, let's do early exchange where we talk about issues related to business and global economy. We're still looking at the latest development in China, talking about the performance of the Chinese economy in the first quarter of the year. We still have our in-house guest with us, which is Dr. Idauza Osamanze. Glad to know you're here with us.
Femi, pleasure to be here, as always.
Now, let's look at the relationship between China and Africa. You know, China is doing everything, of course, over the years to position itself as the most strategic partner for Africa. Recently, they had a partnership with Angola as regards the oil sector and all that. What do you think most African countries could make of this, you know, economic relationship with China? How could it be of benefit to most African countries? And by extension now, let's look at Nigeria. What would be the comparative advantage between these two countries?
Well, and I think in the horse race, the economic horse race that is going on between China and America, there have been some deliberate attempt by the Western media, really, to paint China very black and demonize Chinese assistance to Africa as if it was a form of debt trapionism. Now, but the truth is, I had this conversation with an Indian friend of mine some months back, and we're having this conversation. Is China really a bad country in terms of the assistance that they are giving to Africa, where in some cases like we have seen. We mentioned the case of Angola and Kenya, that of course they have to sign off their sovereignty to China in terms of managing critical infrastructure in those states. But my friend said to me, but you see, China also give money to Europe and give money to the Americas, and they're not having those issues. And if those people are not having those issues, then it behooves us, especially in the third world or developing nations, to also up our skills in terms of negotiation. And this is what it is. And that's the point that Mensa Otabi made in one of his books, By the Future, that of course, you don't go into negotiation with empty stomach. Chances are that you're going to accept anything that is thrown on the table. So if I'm coming to do business with you, I want profit. And I want to get the best of it. Now, if your bureaucrats and officials are not smart enough to negotiate good deal on behalf of their country, or they prioritize their own private interest over and above national interest, and therefore sign off what would have been a benefit to their nation, then you don't blame China for that. You have to blame yourself. So for me, I think China business model for Africa is far better off than what the West is doing. And I think at that level, we can actually negotiate equal partnership in terms of having them do significant investment right in this place, which of course the West will not do. So the relationship is good, but of course Africans also abused it because, like I said, people are not morally right. Many of our politicians are so greedy for gain and these pecuniary benefits at the expense of the nations. This is actually why we're looking at some of all these issues. You see, but what the West has done for us is to say that if they're giving you facility, they're also ensuring that there's a form of accountability, there's a form of responsibility for whoever that is taking this, and this require that some basic reforms be carried out by those states that are requiring this kind of benefits to suit this program. But I don't think that China does really get yourself in what is the politics of your nation. They think from economic perspective, what's going to benefit China at the end of the day. And then, of course, they are ready to sign out relationship with you, irrespective of what your internal politics may look like.
All right, let's look at Nigeria's economy. So China has gotten its own, right, and it's moving well for them. Now the economy of Nigeria has been having serious hardships for quite a while now. So the president is trying to overhaul the management of the economy, setting up a new team of people. We have about 12 people from the cabinet, the central bank governor, and even top businessman Aliko Dangote and an economist there to overhaul Nigeria's economy. Fundamentally, what do you think is wrong with Nigeria's economy that seems to have defied so many economic principles?
Well, I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with us, except the fact that we have an army of people, whether in the public sector or in the private sector, who are basically not nationalistic. That's what is wrong. And so you see, clearing the mess from everywhere is a real problem. I was speaking with some crop of Nigerian bureaucrats the other day and looking at the environment where we were in Kigali and Rwanda. And I've seen an environment where everybody's seen to be really positively minded and ethically driven to see their nation work. And what you find is the antithesis here in Nigeria. So we are looking at the people and the mindset. And so what's critically wrong in Nigeria is that rejigging of our mindset, so that people can begin to think about value first and foremost for their citizen, for their state, which is what patriotism is all about. You get into any country that is advancing in Africa. If you go to Morocco, you go to Botswana, you go to Egypt, you go to Kigali, you see even the common man on the street is making frantic effort to sell their country. And like my friend said to me in Kigali, that there are two nations in Africa that are so passionate in demarketing their nation. And those two nations are Black South Africa and Nigeria. That he has never seen any country on earth where you have people speak with so much hatred against their country. And of course, this was re-echoed in the presidential iftar fast breaking on Thursday last week with some Christian leaders, and he was saying to them, yes, we may not like what a leader is doing, but that does not give you the moral right to curse your country, which is what we do, because we don't see the country as ours. And so because we are so driven by politics, we try everything to pull down structures that are put in place to get the country grow. So if you ask me, I don't think it is more policy we need. I don't think it's even the managing of the economy that is the issue. The real core issue here is that people are nationalistic enough to actually see that things will work. What are the basic things that we are grappling with? For example, electricity. I was sharing with you yesterday and I said to him, look at it. A friend of mine called me and said, what's the state of electricity in Rwanda? And I said, it doesn't blink. I said, how did they got it? They're paying the right price. Here, we want to eat cake and have it. So there's nobody who will come and do investment in your environment when, of course, you are over-regulating that sector. Take, for example, our oil and gas sector. In the last 20 years, there had been no significant investment in that sector. The people who have put money in that sector actually pulling their money out. Why? Because it's not profitable. We are almost at the same exchange rate with Rwanda, for example. In Rwanda today, the Rwanda franc to the dollar is about 1,350 Rwanda franc to $1. And that's almost exactly what we're doing. If the laws in Nigeria, I hear a lot of people talking about structural defect, that's why Nigeria is not making progress. I disagree completely. We don't have issues with structural defect. The real issue that we have is at this point of implementation of policy. Globally speaking, our books are comparably one of the best that you can find anywhere in the world, no matter what anybody says. But you see, what is missing is if you put a policy in place, how do we religiously ensure that there is delivery? This is a problem. And that's what I speak to patriotism. Why will you be, for example, a government officer who give a contract to a foreigner as a contractor, and you are leaving office, and then they can come and build a 30 or 350 bedroom apartment for you for free? How does it happen? How will a regulator, for example, in ACAA, all of a sudden retire, become a director in SOUQ? Or somebody who regulates telecom, become a director in the telecommunication that is regulated. So it shows you how weak we are morally. And nobody is really asking questions. Because as a regulator, you're supposed to be unbiased, Abi? So you're saying this thing. Now, if you are regulating and then you are stepping out of office, then the next thing is to honor you with a director in the company that you are regulating. That should show to people that prior, it's either you were regulating for them, against the nation, and that's why you are being rewarded with such service. So this is what is wrong with our economy. So even if you have management team, which like the president had done, you put them on the ground and they are going to oversee what the economy is doing. But when you have people who are pulling down as you are building, it will be actually difficult for you to make that substantial gain. And that's why for me, the greatest preaching I can ever do is that we must become morally right as a people. And not just government alone, even at the lowest end. In between that space, in that open space, you are seeing open defecation by Nigerians. That's an eyesore. That's terrible. And this is who we are as a people. And that is what we need to deal with. Now, once we can take away those bad behaviors, it won't take Nigeria 5 years to compete among the first 5 economies globally.
Now, talking about the duration of time it will take Nigeria to compete globally with other economies, the task force, the economic task force that has been set up.
Eyes are on most prosperous economy like Lagos, Port Harcourt, probably Kano and Kaduna. But we have 36 states in the federation. When that comes, about 51 stay with the state and 49 come to the state and the local government. What that is used for, you hardly can see it. And this is one of the fundamental issues that we will need to deal with. Because until the states and the local government become accountable, the federal government can actually do nothing. And there's no way, of course. So that's why the president is trying so much to whip up emotions around the state. If growth is not coming from the bottom, there's no way we can feel it at national level. This is a problem that we face because of the way federalism is practiced here.
Now, my next question is going to be 2 in 1. According to the president, when this team was constituted, he said the essence of having this overall team is to ensure that the federal government does that. What do you think he can do, some of the critical steps he can take to ease financial hardship? On the other hand, then let's talk about also boost production in Nigeria.
Yeah, we will still be talking around same issues. What we need is productivity. How do we stimulate productivity? And at the center, a whole lot of effort is being done. Because at the center is actually something that seems invisible. Because really states and the federal capital territory that looks like a state. And all these things are having their levels of government. Now, productivity, because there's no Nigeria that is one, because we're a federal arrangement. So productivity has to happen in the states. All that federal government can do is to empower their people much more productive. But where the real issues lie is at the state level. Because we're not having conversation at that level to see how the state can actually stimulate productivity. Take, for example, we're talking about the coastal line that is coming. All the federal government need to do is to put infrastructure around that corridor to move from Lagos all the way to Akwa Ibom. Now, you put a rail there. The product that the rail is going to carry is not the federal government that is going to go produce it. It should be produced by the state. Now, if the states are not functional, the states. So all these are measures that pull down the effort that is being made at the center. So for me, really, both civil society organizations, the press, and the citizens at large must begin to hold their states and local government accountable with what they are doing with the resources that is coming to them. It's when the states become functional.
Wise men, iconic sculptures and statues adorn major metropolitan cities of the world. In Lagos, Nigeria, the statue of 3 men designed to depict the state's cultural heritage and to usher in visitors and tourists into the ever-accommodating center of excellence is in no doubt an astounding work of art of Colonel Raji Rasaki, designed by Bodu Shodende in 1991 and stand.
Keep watching
SOUQ News.
Lateef Jakonde. Born Lateef Kayode Jakonde in the Ekpetedo area of Lagos Island, Lagos State on July 1929. He studied at the Lagos Public School at Enuowa, Lagos Island, then at Bonham Memorial Methodist School, Port Harcourt, King's College, enrolled at Ilesha Grammar School, where he edited a literary paper called The Quarterly Mirror. Jakande began a career in journalism in 1949 with a daily service and joined the Nigerian Tribune in 1953. The owner, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, appointed Jakande editor-in-chief of the Tribune in 1956. Jakande established John West Publications in 1975 after leaving Tribune and began to publish the Lagos News. He served as the first president of the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria, NPAN. Jakande ran for election as executive governor of Lagos State in 1979 on the Unity Party of Nigeria platform. His administration was effective and open and implemented the cardinal policies of his party. He introduced housing and educational programs targeting the poor, building new neighborhood primary and secondary schools, and providing free primary and secondary education. He gave poor people's children education, and many of them are now very prominent in the society today. Jakande established the Lagos State University and constructed over 30,000 housing units. After the military takeover in 1983, Jakande was charged, prosecuted, and convicted of treason and later pardoned. He served as Minister of Works under the Sani Abacha military regime. He died in Lagos on February 11, 2021. Lateef Jakande was the first civilian governor of Lagos State. Lateef Kayode Jakande, SOUQ Enlightenment.
The challenge of governance is to see how we can leverage what is on the ground and convert this to wealth for the people.
Russia, China are gaining entry into Africa, and it would appear that some Western countries are losing out.
You're working as an expatriate worker, then you're paid in your currency. But then if you must spend those money, you need to convert those money to the local currency to spend.
For Social Security to work, we need to know exactly how many we are. We don't have a precise number. We need to know exact location of people.
When we address this exchange rate volatility, we will see definitely cost of goods and services will come down.
From a security point of view, we should employ the technology to ensure that we can track individuals and goods within the continent.
This is Early Exchange with Femi Ayodele.
You know, the Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development. With our conversation today, we're set to give you the best of programming.
And Blessing Aiche.
We do hope that you enjoy every time you spend with us here today. The world needs peace. The world needs to come to a round table and find solutions to the pockets of troubles.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Yes, indeed, our obligation is to shape policy and advance development. With our conversation, we started our global economic trends from China, talking about the latest development in China, and thereafter, we talked about our own country, Nigeria. And now it's time for us to look at what is playing out in the US, where the inflation rate has moderately increased by 0.3%, according to the statistics provided for February. And then, in spite this, consumer spending is also on the increase. Whereas
has been finding a way to see how they don't tinker with the rate so much, so that, particularly from the perspective of consumer spending, that has increased tremendously. But then the rate of inflation is making consumer spend in terms of disposable income that is available to the average American look a bit difficult. So they are playing around with a view not to pull those figures in a way that doesn't affect the general public. So inflation generally is seen where the price of goods are going up in a shipment that go through that mid-Atlantic route that has been disrupted by that accident. So I think in the short term, that shock in terms of supply chain will affect the economy. But efforts are being made by the government to see how they can redirect shipments to another port that can serve the interests of the mid-Atlantic cities within the United States of America. No doubt that is a major problem, but that will be in the short term. And I hope once that bridge is built in weeks and months later, then the disruption that brought about some of those shocks will have been resolved.
So now the Fed is
23 up to January and up to February and March. There's some consistency in terms of the rate. So there's a likelihood, in my view, that nothing is likely to happen, particularly in an election year. The US election is coming sometime in October or November this year. So why the claims of independence in terms of their operation, the political expediency cannot be underestimated within the current scheme of things. But if from November, which is over 5 months, this suspicion and this clamor for rate cuts has been there, and it has not happened in 5 months, in my view, I don't think it will happen quickly. So let's hope that maybe after this monetary policy and the physical discipline, and which we lack in our environment. So those are, in simple terms, will have been responsible for the slowdown in price. So the economic managers are in reality are in touch with the issues on ground.
When you say some of the management that are missing in Nigeria, which we lack, if I may quote you, now let's go there now.
I just make a little comparison to see that within 5 months, where the expectations that things may change, the trajectory has been okay, just a slight, very tangential in terms of percentage, just 0.8 if I remember correctly. So that's less than 1. So nothing really happened.
If you're looking at the approach, to handling some of these policies in the U.S. compared to what we have there, because you talked about doing the comparison now. Now, are we...
Food inflation and the nominal inflation, what we had was a spike in the figure. So I don't really see anything. Maybe perhaps what might help us maybe in the next 2 years is the minimum capital adequacy rate that has been increased. May show up the capitals of those banks, then the portfolio of lending will increase. Maybe that will have a long-term impact on the economy.
Now, in the case of the U.S. economy, where prices are cooling,
it is perhaps unlike what is playing out in Nigeria, where the benchmark interest rate is at 4.75. So let's talk about the issue of loan repayment default, which might likely occur. Analysts have predicted might likely occur in Nigeria because of the benchmark interest rate increase. But in the case of the US, because the dollar is getting stronger now, and then the Fed had decided to keep the rate at between 5.0 and 5.3 now, which has been consistent for months now. Do you foresee any form of loan repayment default, or could be on the decline this time around?
No, the default will be there, but then the system has already have saying that in that environment, even though the shocks are there, but then the system already have an inbuilt mechanism that will take care of certain shocks already built even into the loan offer where there are defaults. So from your drawn down date, they will tell you if there are problems, you can approach the institution to try and do a repayment package that will suit your current reality. On the other hand here, even when the rates are a bit normal, the rates of defaults are equally very high here. And I think it has to do with a decision based on some other personal interest when they make a final decision on the lending portfolio. So the challenge here is that the banks, based on their compromised nature, I use that word advisedly, in terms of when they package loans. So sometimes loan officers, based on the parameters of the 5 C's of lending, when it gets to top executive, because they have some interest, they undermine some of the appraisers from the lower levels of credit officer, very strong in terms of manufacturing. I'm sure this shock will just be momentary, but the financial authority will find a way to balance the challenge. So if you want to improve on that, they will reduce some pricing in terms of the exports. So some money can come in that can boost the economy. But then the monetary policy regime will put some policy in place that will help to stabilize the economy. On the other hand, the fiscal regime as well will find a way to see how they can balance out so that the negative impact in terms of cost of living for the average Japanese will reduce. But then, like the officials have said, that is going to be momentary. That means they're already putting mechanisms in place. So a few days from now, we'll see how that plays out in terms of how quickly they can reverse those trends.
Now, talking about the performance.
Find a way to reduce some export pricing in some of those essential commodities that are very good at, or products, in such a way that they can find a way to reverse that shock. So I think that guy's observation is okay, but then the projections are positive, but then there's something wrong that is not open to the public as we speak.
So this shock that the Japanese yen is having against the dollar, leading to its weakness, do you think it will form a reason or a strong point for Japan to rally around the BRICS nation in their move for the de-dollarization of the world's economy?
Well, that may not be in the short term.
They have lots of exports, but just that because the yen is weaker, so that means cheaper export for them, but it's going to be more expensive import. So I'm thinking that to shore up, they may be doing more of exports than of imports at the moment. Now, bringing that home to Nigeria, where Nigeria is largely dependent on imports. In a situation like this, what could Nigeria learn from Japan?
What we can learn from them is core manufacturing. They improve on their manufacturing over the years. So there's a low reliance on imports. Rather, you have more exports. But our case is that almost everything is imported. So you have pressure on your external reserve. You have pressure vis-a-vis your local currency and that of the dollar. So until we're able to reverse the trend in terms of core manufacturing, in terms of their practices and standards, even before the regulatory regimes come in to look at what they are doing. Once we're able to perfect those, and this level of high level of corruption between the officials of government who look the other way because they've been giving money under the table and don't look at standardization as it's supposed to be. And once they are substandard goods, they should be removed from the production line. And that will help to improve eventually. So it's a two-way traffic. Local manufacturing must meet up with the standards in terms of manufacturing. Then those who have supervisory role must equally do their bit so that we'll be able to have standard products across Africa.
Talking about the manufacturing sector, you agree with me that the greatest challenge has to be the issue of funding of finance. Looking at the benchmark interest rate now, the rate of 24.75%, which will likely discourage borrowing, How will they cope? Because we are laying emphasis on the manufacturing sector now, looking at what happened in the US, the reference to Japan, and also let's talk about Nigeria now, which is this greatest challenge. But at this crucial time,
the point is that
how will they survive?
The point is that the cost of fund, which you mentioned, is very critical to the manufacturing sector. But regrettably, once the cost of fund is high and the cost of manufacturing of a product is high, the consumer suffers because they will have to pass the cost to the consumer. So the government has a responsibility here to find a way to see how they can support industry, providing windows, some tax incentive, some holidays to manufacturing. So even when the cost of funding in terms of bringing shipment of equipment in terms of manufacturing, the cost of energy is high, then those windows provided from the government be able to reduce the shock from the